Greetings, dear suckers. My name's Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved. And welcome back to Our Darker Purpose. Last time, we went through Chapter 1, and I explained a little bit of the lore and a lot of it of how much this game sucks. Let's talk a bit more about the lore, shall we? I've been dying to tell you about the lore. Yeah, we've already seen the Awakening and the rise and fall of Queen Cordy. But there's quite a bit more to it than that. I see this, on the grounds. A short path ending in a low stone wall and a pair of iron gates marks the formal entrance to the Edgewood Home for Lost Children, where we live. But the school's grounds stretch beyond the horizon. Students are welcome to explore the countryside, which the administrators describe as inviting in Edgewood's literature. But most choose to stay behind the wall, or indoors altogether. Just you wait. There are the strange, clawed shadows that flicker over the rocks in the distance. There are the hissing sounds that come from the foothills, just beyond the gate. There are the struggling, hairy things that the groundskeepers drag in through the yard and down into the cellars at each night. I like the way they did that with planning out the lines so that each one starts with "there are the." Looks neat. Anyway, the school's motto, "A vigilant mind endures all," rises in cut metal over the gates. The sculptor somehow managed to create the letters in such a way that the message reads perfectly from either side. That is peculiar. Who's the sculptor? Bloody Stupid Johnson? That wouldn't surprise me. On books. Cordy's favorite books are the popular series The Adventures of Shuddering Jim and the Bandit. Shuddering Jim is a bumbler who endures constant ridicule from his colleagues at the Global Detective Agency, all of whom are more clever and better dressed. The Bandit is his mismatched nemesis, a master thief who has assembled the world's finest collection of stolen art and artifacts. Shuddering Jim is frequently imprisoned on the Bandit's battle yacht and humiliated by his henchmen, only to escape through the most implausible means at the last moment. In one novel, a meteor strikes the Bandit's torture chamber moments before Jim's planned execution. In another, an assassin spontaneously combusts. Jim tries to claim victory at the end of each book, but never gets closer to finding the Bandit. What a peculiar character. What a peculiar narrative. It must have been fairly popular, because there's over 100 of these books, apparently. So I guess that must appeal to more than just Cordy. Or perhaps there is more to these books than meets the eye. Well, of course there is. There's more to all of this than meets the eye. But yes, remember last time when I said we hadn't even been introduced to the most important character in this whole narrative? Well, we have been now, sort of. One of Edgewood's own, in fact. And look what heights he's risen to. Anyway, the Brogs. After massacring their enemies in the aftermath of the disappearance, Goneril and Regan turned on many of their own followers. These students were strong enough to survive the initial disappearance of the teachers, but too weak to carve a place for themselves in the new hierarchies of Capulets and Woundwarts. Expelled and hunted, they fled to Edgewood's darkest corners. Over time, they grew feral, navigating the school through scent and instinct. The other factions now call them the Brogs. The Brogs tend to attack from the shadows, ambushing unwary visitors with a hail of rocks and thumbtacks. As of yet, there is no evidence to support rumors of fangs and claws. Despite their lack of strategy or leadership, the Brogs control the lowest floors of the building and many of the abandoned classrooms. They are the scariest students in Edgewood, except for all of the others. Ha! The Woundworts are a warlike group of brawny children, led by Goneril, an enormous student who carries 2 croquet mallets. The largest of the Woundworts fight by hurling furniture and fists, and there aren't really any small ones. These were Edgewood's worst bullies even before the disappearance. Many were suspected of un-Edgewood behavior during last year's summer merriment, in which several of the meeker students found themselves tied to the firework launching apparatus. Today, the Woundworts rely on simpler strategies, like blinding an unsuspecting passerby with chalk dust, and then rolling globes towards him. Yeah. Un-Edgewood behavior. Edgewood accepts and even encourages quite a lot, but apparently even they have some standards. Frothy the Dragon. There's general disagreement about what exactly went wrong with Frothy the Cardboard Dragon during last year's winter musical. Most believe that the dragon was intended to remain stationary, that it had a relatively minor role in the production, and that red cellophane would have been just as effective as actual fire. Sadly, the enterprising student who originally designed the beast was consumed by his own creation moments before the theater was evacuated. Tragic. No one knows where the dragon went after leaving the auditorium, or whether it is still somewhere on the grounds. The administrators gleefully described the incident as a remarkable occurrence that stood out in an otherwise unremarkable semester. Remarkable is a word for it. This is the, I think we fought this one. This is the one that summons those little fire things that follow you around. They basically just run around in a circle around. And then summons additional ones, but that doesn't really change much. And then does the charge thing, which then sends fire downward as it goes. Fairly easy to deal with. Some harmless markings. Before the adults disappeared, Regan had a gift for engaging her classmates with her popular chalkboard games. While the administrators frown on most student attempts at leisure, they seemed pleased with her initiative. It was only after several weeks that it became difficult to ignore the odd fates and accidents later befalling those who joined in Regan's fun. While the administrators pooh-poohed initial reports of immolation, disintegration, and paralytic insanity, even they eventually had to order the games discontinued. The final straw was likely the fate of the unfortunate Nicholas Ellenwick, dragged into a wall by spectral hands just seconds after Regan defeated him in tic-tac-toe. Some harmless markings. A rather more challenging boss as the early stages go. It has a whole thing where it'll have these little chalkboard things on all the walls that will send out chalk clouds, and it'll run through them in a big old square. And you can technically hit it while it's in those chalkboards, but it's bloody hard. But eventually she'll come out of the chalkboard and start running toward you, and and that's a lot easier to get her when she's doing that. She mostly just focus on dodging the chalk clouds, so. Oh, also, notice that the administrators apparently frown on most student attempts at leisure. Because that's a completely normal thing for administrators to do. Stamping down on the children having fun. Makes sense to me. Anyway. The Arrival Day Gifts. Each student receives a gift from the administrators on the anniversary of his or her arrival day. Like some sort of twisted version of birthdays. No two gifts have ever been the same. Some are relatively benign, like the slinking device that could walk itself down a flight of stairs while spewing electric sparks. Yes, benign. Relatively. Others are more dangerous, like the mechanical lobster claw that chewed through half a dormitory hall before burrowing into the floor and disappearing. Not all gifts threaten to maul or incinerate their recipients. Some, for instance, are only premonitory. One child received a white feather the day before a hawk dragged him off the terrace. Unsurprisingly, many students prefer to hide their unopened gifts in disused closets, or slip them down coal chutes. The administrators frown on this practice, which they consider the absolute height of ingratitude, and punish it severely. Yeah, as you can see, some kind of slightly curvy axe, a hand with a terminating in a ball. That one's just brazenly a weird metal jaw without any wrapping. No wait, I guess that is wrapped, technically. But not very subtle wrapping. And actually normal looking present, but with wings. This one, the main boss is this thing, and it floats around occasionally summoning these guys. And also, yeah, and it'll summon these two as like these fairly beefy guys that'll float around, and then it'll continuously summon the little guys that look like that to attack you. You should try and take out these two, because they're real bastards, but, well, you make the call if you have the kind of DPS to take out these faster than they can be spawned. It's, well. The really nice thing about this is that for some reason, each of these three things, this, and this, count as separate bosses. Similar to the way the Cauldron of Yesterdayers works, but I'll get to that. And so they give their own separate big chunk of XP, and if you have that one item which gives you tokens every time you kill a boss, they'll each give you tokens. Since the amount of tokens you get seems to be completely random, I have no idea if they give you more or less tokens than normal, but it's probably just, well, like normal, completely random. And yeah, arrival day is obviously the day they arrived in Edgewood, which might be what this is referring to with the struggling hairy things. Maybe. Why do the administrators give such malicious gifts, and where do they even find them? I do not know. It might be a metaphor for something, but I think it's just weird. Oh, there's actually an item. In fact, I think we saw that item that was an unopened gift. The one that gave additional shots. Yeah, I did a whole rant about how much it sucked. I guess, in a way, that's thematic for how much these Arrival Day gifts suck, but, well, it still sucks. Intentionally sucking is still sucking. Anyway, Cauldron of Yesterdayers. Students who refuse to participate in mandatory kitchen maintenance activities may see their fresh stew replaced with a pot of yesterdayers, leftovers from the day before. Or they might get other punishments, like what was mentioned before, with having a stay in the freezer or whatever it was. While the administrators note that most students display no adverse reaction after receiving the older stew, those who actually eat it exhibit symptoms ranging from a simple fever to uncontrollable rage. Funny turn of phrase there. Yeah, most people don't have any issues with it, because they don't eat it. There is no explanation for why a bowl of yesterdayers continues to bubble even when served chilled, or why the kitchens are occasionally evacuated and sealed off when a forgotten cauldron of yesterdayers is rediscovered. Yeah, this is one of the slightly trickier bosses in the first chapter. It has this whole thing where there's 4 pots of the yesterdayers, cauldrons rather, and it will occasionally go down into it and pop up in a different one, and it'll throw out this blast of a whole bunch of little thorn things, kind of like what are on its arms, if you can call those arms, which I assume are some kind of knife. They're kind of weird for a knife, but whatever. It's pretty weird for leftovers. It's not so bad, although it does do this thing where every so often at certain stages of its health, it'll go down into a cauldron for an extended period of time, and these little slimes will appear that die in one hit, but if they'll constantly move toward the cauldron that it went down into. And if they reach it, they'll heal it by a sizable chunk. So they can be kind of a menace, but they're not that hard to get rid of, since, like I said, they take one hit to kill. If you've got piercing, they're even easier. Or if you've got that one thing which creates this little blast of paper every time you kill an enemy. Good shit. Anyway, so once you get it down to like half health, it'll create a second helping, which acts the same as it does, and has a decent chunk of health. And like Arrival Day Gifts, counts as a separate boss, effectively. And you really want to take that out first. Hence why the challenge is not doing that. See, each of these has the whole little challenge thing. The achievements, effectively. So yeah, this serves double purpose as both a lore thing and also a listing of achievements. It's pretty neat. And yeah, one thing to note is that sometimes, I don't know what causes it, but sometimes the hitbox of the cauldron doesn't vanish when it does the whole go into the cauldron and summon slimes things. So when that happens, what you want to do is kill the closest ones and then leave like at least one alive so you can continue beating the shit out of it. Depending on your DPS, it might even be worth ignoring the slimes entirely, or most of them anyway, aside from the ones you can very easily kill without moving, and just go full tilt into pelting it when it does that. It's kind of funny. But yeah, when the second helping is on the board, this becomes one of the most difficult bosses in Chapter 1 to actually dodge the attacks of, because it's flooding you with so many. And heaven help you if you activate hard mode. Then you get a third helping too. And then, well, let's just say that's one of the few occasions where chalk actually becomes very, very useful. Anyway, Sudsy the Inanimate. In the aftermath of the Frothy incident at the Winter Musical, several students were dismayed to see that the administrators had commissioned a second dragon sculpture for the Ice Carnival 2 weeks later. These holdouts refused to attend, leading the administrators to criticize their primitive superstition and very un-Edgewood-like cowardice. Is that un-Edgewood-like? Ultimately, they were carried to the terraces against their will, so that they could see for themselves that this new dragon represented no threat. Following the destruction caused by the second dragon, the administrators suggested that any mishaps were likely the result of a few ungrateful students bringing bad luck down on themselves and their friends. Oh, naturally. You tappers. And the last of the bosses in Chapter 1, Candelabra of Longing. The Candelabra of Longing is a large chandelier that hangs above one of the main assembly halls. Students, against the recommendations of their peers, will sometimes scribble requests on slips of paper and toss them up to burn in the candles. Impressive aim. Rumor has it that the lantern will grant these requests, but at some unknown cost to the supplicant. While the administrators claim that the practice is just one of the unique and harmless traditions that set Edgewood apart, naysayers point to the worrisome hand-like shapes in the flames, and the way that the chain doesn't actually connect to anything on the ceiling. Indeed. And they wonder why Edgewood students are so superstitious. Yeah, this one is not so bad, but it is kind of annoying. The way it works is that it takes advantage of the bloody annoying light mechanics in this game. It'll do a thing where only the area around the candelabra will be illuminated, and you won't have enough light to see shit outside of it, which is a bit of an issue considering there's tacks on the floor that will damage you if you walk on them. All over. You know, pretty rough, but it's not going to be the one that kills you. Let's just be frank, it's not. But it might cheese out a few annoying hits that might put you at a disadvantage in the next floor. Oh, I completely forgot to talk about how Sudsy the Inanimate works. It works kind of like the Frothy the Dragon, that it'll, like, hover up and down on one end of the field, and then occasionally do a charge thing, which will send it to the other side of the field. But instead of having a fire follow you around, instead it'll send out a little ice thing which will bounce around the field and damage you. And every so often it'll create a glacial spike in the floor, which will damage you if you walk over it, but will also protect you from this flood of icicles that go across the whole screen. And also, it will damage you. It'll damage Sudsy if you get it to charge into it, which is trickier than it sounds. All in all, probably harder than Frothy the Dragon, but not particularly hard. Although it might, and it'll probably be over faster than Frothy. Anyway, we've gone through all of the bosses and a couple of those bits of lore and such, and the finale. Now for what is, in all but the final chapter, the final 4 bits of lore in chapters 1 through 3. A set of 4 cases. Each one, as you can see, excerpts from the book of the same name in the Edgewood Library of the Shuddering Gym series. Here we have The Case of the Creaking Tower. This is the finest submarine ever designed, the sailor said. The bandits' henchmen will never find us here. We'll deliver this antique typewriter safely, sir, you can rest assured. Shuddering Jim sighed and looked out the porthole. His knees ached. He kept having the same dream, where the elevator doors opened and the bandit was waiting for him. At 150 fathoms underwater, he wanted to agree with the sailor. Instead, he said, "It's beautiful down here." Jim and the sailor stared out at the coral. Neither of them could see the serpentine creature behind them, the one with the oddly mechanical movements, which had followed them from port. Book 4 in the Shuddering Gym series, page 53, Edgewood Library, number 2349012. The Case of the Furious Chandelier. I've always had a taste for reclaimed things, the fashion designer said. The Platinum Crescent was originally considered vulgar, bourgeoisie trash. Today it is known as the most beautiful sewing machine in the world. I keep it in my workshop. I'm here all day, every day, and I can't imagine it'd be safer anywhere else. She paused. Excuse me, am I boring you? Shuddering Jim rubbed his eyes. No, he said. Just tired. Bad dreams keeping me up. The designer wagged her finger. Your dreams can be warnings. Be respectful. She gestured to the dresses on the mannequins that surrounded them in the shop. They can also be beautiful. My dreams grace the runways of every fall and spring show worth mentioning. Behind them, one of the bandits' henchmen adjusted his mask. Not all of the mannequins were mannequins. Book 9 in the Shuddering Gym series, page 71, Edgewood Library, number 4102912. Your dreams can be warnings, huh? I mean, theoretically, yes. Your subconscious does observe a lot more than you do consciously, but mostly dreams are just stuff. The Case of the Duplicitous Dragon. I keep the paintings up here, the tycoon said. The lights of the city spread beneath them like a starfield. I call this room the Solarium. 2,500 feet in the air. Guards on every floor from here to the ground. Nothing above us but glass and sky. So tell me about this bandit. He reminds me of me, self-made man. Shuddering Jim sipped his champagne politely. He hated saying nice things about the bandit. Yes, he said. He was born in an orphanage, one of the bad ones in the slums. Dramatic place to grow up. Well, he's been very successful since. I doubt even he has ever experienced a view like this. They admired the night. Not 20 feet behind them, a black, hot air balloon bumped against a building. Invisible. Book 12 in the Shuddering Gym series, page 117. Edgewood Library, number 1289312. An orphanage, you say? That's interesting. One of the bad ones, even. Well, I wouldn't perhaps call this the slum. What is that? Just noticed in the distance, just underneath the SE at the end there. Is that a building, or is that more trees? Probably more trees. And again, the trees might not be trees. But yes, are you beginning to see the picture here? Well, probably not. It's a bit early. The case of the missing chalk. Do you know why I offered you a job? The chief asked, looking thoughtfully at the remains of the Virtuoso's security system. 30 years ago. I assume, Jim said, that you wanted one less pickpocket on the streets. His knees ached. The security system had been state-of-the-art, uncrackable, and encased in a thin layer of titanium. Someone had destroyed it by dropping a globe from the 5th floor balcony. And you were pretty good, the chief said. One of the few people who could take a wallet from the outside breast pocket on an overcoat, as I recall. That is impressive. A hard thing to do. A lot harder than it sounds, and it doesn't sound particularly easy. But it's simpler than that. Jim knelt, trying to ignore the pain, sifting his hand through the wires and metal and broken glass. He raised a single white feather, the symbol worn by the bandit's henchmen, aloft. Naively, the chief said, I believe in redemption. Book 13 in the Shuddering Gym series, page 83. Edgewood Library, number 2913212. Well, that was certainly illuminating, was it not? Now, you may notice two things here. One is the connection between these cases and the bosses. Missing chalk, some harmless markings. Duplicitous dragon? Well, that could be either of these. Probably Frothy the Dragon, since people knew Sudsy was bad news. The Furious Chandelier? Well, that one's obvious. The Creaking Tower? That one's less obvious. It doesn't seem to match up to Cauldron of Yesterdays, or the Arrival Day Gifts, or Sudsy for that matter. So it seems to be the odd one out. But perhaps it refers to, for instance, this. Or, indeed, something else entirely. Perhaps. But the point is, the connections between those other three are very clear. The second is perhaps even more obvious. Born in an orphanage was the bandit. Well, this is a bit more than just an orphanage, but, well, there's perhaps a connection there. But there's a third connection. A third connection that you probably have not noticed. Or maybe you have. I don't know you. He raised a single white feather, the symbol worn by the bandit's henchmen, aloft. One child. Not all gifts threaten to maul or incinerate the recipients. Some, for instance, are only premonitionary. One child received a white feather the day before a hawk dragged him off the terrace. Telling, is it not? But of course that's not the only important detail to be found here. Jim was apparently a damn good pickpocket. Good enough to take a wallet from a breast pocket on an overcoat. That's impressive. Maybe something to keep in mind. And finally, getting into chapter 2 here, for a moment, a tale revised. What appears in place of the awakening after the first time that you defeat Goneril. And continue once again. A tale revised. A girl named Cordy awoke under a broken bookcase, confused and scared, having barely survived Goneril and Regan's attack in Mr. L's classroom. Every time a Cordy awoke under the bookcase, of course, the school was different. The Edgewood Home for Lost Children is an uncertain place, and the hallways reorganize themselves in a variety of patterns. Strange things still danced on the chalkboards and sloshed in pots of stew. And somewhere, Goneril still paced impatiently on an upper floor. This time, however, new creatures awaited her in the darkness. Cordy recalled only the classroom. Memories can be reset, if not destroyed. Certain teachings, however, remain. Now that is very interesting. Every time a Cordy awoke into the bookcase, not every time Cordy awoke. It's not as if she's going back there. It's a Cordy, or a girl named Cordy, even. They're all named Cordy, but are they the same? And would they still continue to awake there? Because after all, what was it said here, in the Rise and Fall of Queen Cordy? Until she in turn was killed by a quiet girl no one had ever paid much attention to. So yes, the Cordys continue to keep coming, even if the previous Cordy hasn't died. Perhaps they never ceased. And yet, Cordy recalled only the classroom. Memories can be reset, if not destroyed. Certain teachings, however, remain. Now that is an interesting turn of phrase. If they were separate entities, then why would the memories need to be reset or destroyed? Why would it be strange that she recalled only the classroom? Unless now that could be a deceptive phrasing. But if not, that implies that despite their multiplicity, is that the right term? Despite there being multitudes of them, they have, what, the same mind, perhaps? It is perhaps simply just a Cordy, and yet there is still some continuity there, isn't there? And perhaps this time, things will be different. Perhaps. I don't know. But at least we'll be sure. Sure of what, exactly? I don't know. This has been a lot of fun, going over the lore of this game with an audience. I haven't shown you the whole picture, of course. I haven't even shown you a fraction of it. Feel free to read these on your own time if you want. Yes, there is a great deal of fascinating shit going on here in the Edgewood Home for Lost Children. And perhaps beyond. I was just gonna go through all that real quickly and then continue my run, but you know what? There is far too much to talk about for me to cut down to something reasonable. So this is how I'm gonna break this down then. It'll be a repeating pattern of me going into the game itself, dealing with the fucking mechanics to it all, and suffering in it, and fighting the bosses and all that stuff, going over that shit, and while I'm there, talking about the various bits of lore in the items and all that shit. And I'm gonna do that all the way through a single chapter, and then I'm going to end the video there, and then after that is going to be a sort of interlude chapter, I guess you could say. Yeah, let's call them interludes. Which is going to be me going through each of the lore documents of that chapter, of which I've gotten all of them, of course, thankfully. So yes, that was our little dive into the lore so far. We met Shuddering Jim and the Bandit. We got to learn a fair bit more about Edgewood itself, and we made the first initial connections between the two. And we learned enough to be confused about Cordy. All in all, a promising start. Next time, we delve back into the god-awful gameplay. But wow, how is it version 480? What the fuck? Can't possibly have been that many versions of this. I mean, anyway. So until then, I have been Joe Bob, and I'm very peeved. And remember, dislike the video, unsubscribe if you're for some reason subscribed, and leave a nasty comment in the comment section down below. Fuck you all so much for watching, and so long, suckers.